Hey, what's up, Arch City PLO subscribers, YouTube subscribers as well? Welcome. This is your monthly free step-by-step video that I provide for you guys that don't know what I'm talking about or haven't seen this before. This is a large part of the content that I provide on my site to my paid subscribers. They get access to essentially these hand breakdowns, how I think during a hand, like what my specific thoughts are, as you can see there. And I've been pumping these out pretty much daily on average. I would say maybe closer to like 5 days a week right now, but adding in other videos like recorded sessions. There's hand charts. There's a ton of content on the site that you can mix in along with these step-by-step videos. But where the site is going, I think these step-by-step videos are going to be a large part of what I do, the face of the site, so to speak. I just think that it's a great way to get a quick, simple breakdown of just how to think during hands, how to be a good thinking poker player. We're not going to play perfect, but if we can set ourselves up for success each and every hand with a simple system, then I think that's going to benefit a lot of you greatly. Now, as you'll see, once you get to a point where you feel like you have a pretty large edge on your competition, you're going to be able to step outside of the system a little bit. There's going to be a little bit more room for flexibility. You're going to see that here almost in an exaggerated manner because multi-way pots do tend to get a little more complex sometimes. But let's get into the hand. And as you guys can see, I'm not on camera right now. I'll be back on camera next week. For you site subscribers, I believe I actually will be back on camera in the next video or two here. Got the office construction in the basement essentially done, so I know that you guys have been waiting for that. I don't know. Maybe you don't care about my face being on there, but I think it makes it more personable and makes it more like a one-on-one coaching thing. I think a lot of you enjoyed that. So let's get into the hand. Tight aggressive player under the gun. He raises. Loose passive fish calls. This is a private online 1-2 game, so you see the 3x sizing there in 1-2 big blind or small blind big blind. I think there's a scenario with jacks where there are scenarios where I always 3-bet. There are scenarios where I always call in 9-handed games. I know you guys hate pocket jacks, so that's why I chose this hand in particular. I think with a tight aggressive player, considering his under the gun range, it's going to be pretty damn strong. I don't think 3-betting is the most efficient. I think I do well in a multi-way pot, in position, deeper, where I'm going to have an edge, especially going to be able to outplay players with aggression on a lot of textures. If I 3-bet here, I think a lot of times I just encourage like a range that's either hands that are crushing me or hands that are flipping. I might fold out some of the hands that I'm actually crushing myself. Will some of those pairs that are worse call? Yeah, and that's why you could argue doing a little more 3-betting, especially when deeper. I will mention this is a no-rake environment, so there is more room to do a little more calling, leave SPRs a little bit high, and try to outplay these guys with more flexibility in position. So I did decide to call this time. I think it's arguable that you could 3-bet, but I'm comfortable with my first step as far as my pre-flop decision. So step 2, and I'm going to say real quick for you YouTube subscribers, I've told my site members this many times. Step 1 is always going to be the first step, right? Pre-flop has to come before post-flop play. Steps 2 through 4, though, you don't have to follow this exact order. It doesn't really matter. These are just the thoughts and how I've realized they come through in my head. I don't think about these like in such a mechanical manner. I just have noticed these are the thoughts that I have, and so I kind of, when I thought about, well, what do I think during a hand, this is what I put on paper, and this is what came out in pretty much the order every time and how I think about hands. So step 2, stack to pot ratio. Obviously, you can see here that it's like 13 or so, 13 or 14 with the tight aggressive player. About 9 with the fish. That's going to be high either way. And when your head's up and you have an SPR that high, you need more than just an overpair to commit all your chips profitably. When you're multi-way, that's even further exaggerated. You need more of a hand. You need more equity. So as far as stack to pot ratio, how that helps me plan out a hand, I have an understanding that with jacks, I probably don't want to get all in. I probably most of the time don't want to bloat the pot too early. It depends on some other factors as well, though. Step 3, range and polarity advantage. I believe the tight aggressive player has a little bit of a range advantage simply because his under the gun opening range is going to be pretty narrow. Mine's going to look similar to his, but mine's going to be capped. I don't have aces. I don't have kings. I probably don't have some ace-kings suited. Don't have some queens. I don't have any aces or kings. I don't have some queens and some jacks like I alluded to. Fish is going to, the loose passive guys, they're going to call really wide pre-flop. We can conclude that he's definitely the one that doesn't have the strongest range here. It's going to be the weakest for sure. But as far as polarity advantage, meaning who has more nutty combos, I actually think that belongs to myself and the fish. In a no-rake environment, I am going to do some cold calling with pocket twos, pocket fours. If there were a higher rake environment and we weren't as deep, I wouldn't be calling with those hands. It's not going to be profitable to just set mine with those. Now, I can get away with likely calling with those if I am 100 bigs or deep at all, and I do think I have a pretty large skill advantage against my opponent because I'm going to be able to outplay him on textures to where I don't need to flop sets to win. A lot of you guys that aren't comfortable with your post-flop play yet, you need to get rid of these small pairs if stacks are not deep enough. The fish can definitely have some pocket pairs here. Like I said, they will overplay pocket pairs out of position. So we have more sets. He doesn't have as much junk as the fish. He also is not capped like I am. So simply put, he has a little bit of a range advantage. We have the polarity advantage. The thing is about this board, even with him having a little bit of a range advantage, and it's still pretty close, he doesn't hit often enough here to justify betting, in my opinion. Yes, he has some overpairs, but he has a lot of missed Broadways that it's going to put him in a position to not succeed and put him in awkward spots where he has bloated pots with really only just one pair of a lot of the time. And for that reason, now I do factor in the fish calling as, it's going to be part of my decision-making process. But generally, if he's not raising here, he's pretty capped. He's going to have a lot of one-pair hands, a lot of marginal draws. Step 4, where am I at within my range? Jacks is they're going to be pretty high up there. Besides sets, I don't have aces or kings. I don't have some queens. I think I would flat some queens against this particular player with his particular opening range. But jacks they're going to be really high up there. Now, does that mean that we always raise if we're really high up there no matter what? No. If this were ace, king, deuce, and I had ace, king, I think I can do some raising, but he still has more top set and middle set on that board, and I have none of those. And it would be a disaster to have him actually make a good fold with a hand like ace, queen, or ace, jack on ace, king, deuce, and only invite basically better hands to crush me. So there are scenarios where you're not supposed to really do any kind of raising with your range, even if you're at the very top of your own range. But in this scenario, if you guys mess around with like Pio Solver or you have any experience with solvers, if players c-bet far too often from out of position, you'll see this in No Limit, you'll see it in PLO. If they c-bet far too often from out of position, especially when they're deep, especially on boards that they don't connect with that well, the solver's going to tell you to raise them with probably almost everything in your range. Like I'm not exaggerating. I'm not kidding about that, guys. You're supposed to be very aggressive in spots like this. So I get the feeling that this player, he's your typical tight, aggressive, low stakes guy. I think he's going to raise pre-flop. He's going to think that he's supposed to c-bet a lot here, and he's going to overdo it. The fish is going to call with too wide of a range. I think it's a good spot to get some thinner value, to get some protection. The nice thing about this, now I said generally with, I think, one pair of hands with this high of an SPR, I don't want to bloat the pot, but you can see how texture and how my opponents will respond to my aggression is going to affect my decision here. So I'm stepping outside the bounds of this system just a little bit. If my tight aggressive opponent were to come over the top of this raise, I know I have an easy bet fold. I don't think he's doing this with pocket tens or worse. I think it's only queens or better. If he happens to have like ace, king of spades, that's still a hand that's basically flipping, along with the hands that are crushing me. So his range overall has me in really rough shape. It's a very easy and exploitive bet fold spot. The nice thing about this is if he is c-betting with ace, king, or ace, queen, I deny him of that equity. I get him to fold that hand, which is fine. And a lot of times the worst case scenario, I'm getting the fish to call with definitely a worse range. So I'm getting max value in this spot, all while in practice playing the hand is, I guess, like to make the hand as easy to play as possible. Now, I want to be careful when I say that, guys, because I think a lot of you do that in a lot of spots, but you do it just for that reason. You don't consider the fact that you're making the most money or there's some kind of positive, exploitative reason to do that. You don't want to play hands in poker just to make it easier for you to play. That's going to lead to a lot of really bad play in a lot of spots. You got to be careful with that. But in this spot, it's just a little added bonus knowing that, hey, worst case scenario, good scenario, they both fold. That's fine. I take down the pot. If they both call, I think I'm generally ahead of their ranges. At that point, I probably would look to slow down just a little bit with this hand. I don't want to play for stacks with just jacks. But a lot of times this player will over c-bet. He'll fold as he did in this hand. And the fish will do a lot of folding, but if he does call, I think you're generally going to know that this is going to be a lot of draws. I would say rarely some 7x. The second 7 makes that certainly not as likely now. But I think when they get raised there, they don't generally, I don't think they continue with a lot of like pocket 8s, pocket 6s. They might have a few overpairs. That's fine. I'm crushing those. I think you're generally going to see a lot of flush draws here, like a lot of like queen 10 of spades and stuff like that. So on the 7, he decides to check. And I think this is actually a scenario where a lot of you check a little too often. Yes, I don't want to play for stacks, like I said, with jacks necessarily, but that was on the flop. The SPR is a little bit lower now. Could he have some rare 7x perhaps? Maybe. I just don't think I see it often enough from these players. I would like to charge his draws and perhaps stack some of the hands that are, in fact, like 10s, 9s, and 8s if he does have them. This is a situation where I think a lot of you check because you fear the 7 and you think to yourself, well, maybe it's like way ahead or way behind, like I'm crushing some of his worst pairs, but I could be behind his 7s. You guys got to understand that if he does have some overpairs and if he does have some draws, we would like to charge those, and we would like to basically stack the worst hands that are willing to continue. So I do go ahead and shove. And kind of anticlimactic, he does fold. He actually flashed, I believe it was ace 10 of spades, so he did have those overcards in the flush draw. It makes sense. Again, I didn't plan on necessarily playing for stacks with jacks, but you can see how you guys can get yourself to a level where you can step outside the bounds of the system, and you can pick up, you can adjust as you pick up new information to play the hand essentially to not just like the best of your capability, but to make the most money possible, and usually in the most exploitative manner that you can, because these guys are not going to be able to counter what you're doing as an exploit often enough, if that makes sense. A quick example was when I do raise, not all in, but when I raise to 44 here, I think it might have been 45, but whatever. If this player understood that I was able to attack him with a lot of my range in the spot, he could perhaps click it back with bluffs himself, knowing that his perceived range is too strong, and he could get me to overfold a lot of my range. I know players that will attack me in spots like this. That's why I sometimes will exploitively c-bet, and then I will click it back, but more like in a balanced manner. I'll have hands at the very top that I know are good to get it in with, and then some bluffs to make him feel really indifferent in spots like this when he does have some of these pairs. So that's getting a little complex. It's getting a little ahead of where I want most of you guys to be at this point. But you can see how I did still use the system to plan my hand out on the flop, to understand the high stack to pot ratio, understand who had the range and polarity advantage, why this player should not be probably c-betting all that often, even with maybe a slight range advantage. And then where am I at within my own range? And that really does help me plan the hand out. I came up with a nice exploitative plan based on the info that I had here, and I followed through with it. If I would have been re-raised here, I can fold my hand as a huge exploit, but I just get called by the fish. And then I'm able to understand that this isn't enough 7x. It's just a lot of like pocket pairs that I'm crushing and then some draws. Felt very comfortable shoving for his last 155 with an SPR of just barely over 1. So for you site subscribers, I will obviously continue posting videos about daily for you guys. For you YouTube subscribers, if you have any feedback or questions, go ahead and let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you next week for the next video. And like I said, for you site subscribers, you'll continue to get the daily, like I said, daily content that you've been getting recently. So I will see all of you guys soon. Thanks. you.